but the tradition held always that cow dung has certain properties by which, if you put it on the roof of your ceiling, it's considered very good for the house. So, of course, this was considered by modern scientists for a very long time to be very strange, because how come by putting the dung of an animal on top of your home, you are protected? However, it has been in recent times understood that cow dung has antiseptic properties, and it has a capacity to absorb ultraviolet rays from the sun. So basically, this has been proved by German scientists in the modern world. So basically, the days of ozone layer depletion, this cow dung is said, they kind of recommend that if you put it on top of your home, it can actually absorb UV rays and protect you from radiation. It's a very simple example of something that seems very insignificant at way beginning. Okay, we'll go to more examples. So just like if you go to geography, the Mahabharata basically talks about the structure of the earth as well, in terms of the continents, planets, etc. And the concept, like for example, in the modern world, the simple fact that the earth is round was understood somewhere in the 16th century, right? When Christopher Columbus traveled, right, because the Western conception was the earth is flat, and Christopher Columbus believed that the earth is round. And everybody forbade him to go towards the west because they said that you will just fall off from the end. But he was convinced, and he discovered America in the process, so far. Okay. But the point is that the concept that bhugol, that the earth is round, is understood since a very long time within the Vedic tradition in general. We'll go on to some more things. For example, that plants have life. This is something which is again very clearly explained in all the Puranas and Itihasas in general, that plants also have life. However, it was Jagdish Chandra Bose in 1918, our Indian scientist, who discovered that plants have life, from the modern scientific perspective. We'll go on to some more facts. So basically, what I'm actually going to do right now is, I'm going to walk you through different streams of knowledge and give you certain examples of what the Vedas have been speaking of and what we actually understand in today's world. That's basically what I'm trying to do. Okay, so basically if you go on to predictions, there is a lot of material present that talks about okay, so now before I actually talk about this, I'll have to go into some more details in terms of dating of the Vedic texts, which has always been an issue. But the tradition holds that all these Vedic texts are certainly, before Christ. So basically, in fact, they are said to be written approximately in the 3rd century or 3000 BC. That's the time when, as far as tradition is concerned, when they were first written down. Right? So because they have been written down at that time, they also contain a lot of predictions. That means they talk about people who come in the future and talk about many of their activities. And in fact, it's not only Indians they talk about. Even for example, if you look at the Bhavishya Purana, it even talks about Christ and Prophet Muhammad, etc. Though they do not strictly belong to India per se. But still, there is mention of them by name and by acts. So basically, what we wish to say is axioms are there everywhere. Okay, so axioms are there in science, like so many that I already spoke of. Then similarly, there are axioms in the Vedic domain as well, which any open-minded person could easily look at it and accept. We go to some more things about India in general. One thing about India which is very important to understand if we actually study the history of the world is, India is the only society in the world which never had slavery. So please note, this is a very important fact actually. The concept of slavery which was there in the Roman civilization, beginning from the Egyptian civilization, all the way to the blacks and the whites during the American War of Independence and so on, indicated that in the West for a period of over 2000 years, people were bought and sold. You understand? It was a very common practice in the West for over 2000 years, till the 19th century. So the concept of slavery, of someone being sold, is not there at all in Indian system. Okay. Similarly, even India invading any country has never been there in history. In fact, if you see the Indian model of kings also, monarchy, was very much different from the Western model of monarchy. If you know, if you read Roman history or the Western history in general, the way they had monarchy was that whenever they would conquer a particular place, they would completely wipe out that particular civilization. And there would be no trace of anything left. Like if you see generally all over the world, like for example, take South America. So South America was ruled mainly by the Spanish, right? You know that? The Spanish ruled over South America. Today, if you see in South America, there is absolutely no trace of any previous civilization of the South Americans. The Spanish who came, they basically brutally, they finished it off completely. And they established their own. In fact, even the language. If you go to South America today, the people, what do they speak? Spanish. Right? Their language, their culture, their Mayan, that was the culture, Mayan culture of the South America, completely destroyed. But in the Indian system, if you see carefully, this concept was never there that when you conquer some other country, you have to finish off that civilization. This concept is absolutely not there. Like even if you read the Indian books, like for example, you see Mahabharata, it talks about wars even at that time. It talks about, for example, how when the Pandavas would fight, for example, with Jarasandha, and when Bhima kills Jarasandha, a question comes actually. Who takes over Magadha at that point? Jarasandha is killed now. So is it that Yudhishthira becomes the king of Magadha? No, they are very clear about it. Jarasandha's son only becomes the king. It is just that, then why did they fight? They fought simply because Yudhishthira wanted to be established as the monarch of the entire country and Jarasandha was opposing it. So they just said that you just accepted he's a monarch, that's all. You can continue to rule. We are not going to interfere in your people or take over your kingdom. The whole concept, so it's a very subtle point, but very important to notice that the whole concept of taking over and destroying an earlier civilization in order to push your civilization was never there in India. So that's something very significant if you carefully observe. Of course, wealth of India, I don't have to say much because India was always considered the most important feather in the British their cap, basically. Yeah, even Christopher Columbus actually was not looking for America, by the way. He was looking for India, right? He accidentally bumped into the American continent. Okay, so I'm not reading this. So I also wish to tell you that the Indian books, yeah, good question. Good question.
In Harishchandra's story, Harishchandra sold himself in case for
Yeah, understood.
Then how could you say that India was never known level?
Yeah, good. So the Harishchandra story, if you see, I'm not sure whether everybody understands or knows the context in which you're asking. He was in great poverty. That's the story, right?
Yeah.
Where he has nothing. So basically, he becomes the servant of someone. Okay, so he owes money to someone, to some sage. So basically, he has nothing with himself. So basically, he has to give himself completely the service of someone, and he takes money and he gives. See, this is completely totally different from what I am talking. When I am talking about slavery, I am talking about organized slavery. Try to understand the Western conception of slavery. The Western conception of slavery has markets for 2000 years. Markets where people have been purchased and sold, and not even named, numbered. You understood? And with absolutely no rights. This is a different thing where, for example, I become poor. Then I give myself to somebody just so that I can pay off the debt of someone. It's a personal thing if you notice very carefully. It's not something that's prompted by the society. It's something that, I have landed in trouble because of which I am kind of desperate to sell myself. Now that's a different thing. That even today people sell themselves, literally speaking. Even though slavery is kind of abolished in most places, literally people are willing to, because of extreme degree of poverty. But the thing is, the society does not have any such system where such a thing is encouraged. That's exactly what I'm pointing. In fact, even the Indian caste system, I'll be talking on the Indian caste system a lot as I come later to some other system at another appropriate time. but I'm not touching on that part today. But that is completely different from the slavery model. Even in that, in the Indian caste system, there was no concept of slavery as such. We'll come to that a little later. Okay. Now, another important thing is that the Indian philosophy and thought and writings have been the only set of books that actually even spoke about things like medicine. You understood? So basically, one thing about the Indian system, about the Vedas is that they have, by and large, have kind of two branches of knowledge, very broadly speaking. One is about matter, okay, which they do talk a lot, right? And the other talk is about soul and God, etc. Now, obviously, this part is something which is metaphysical. That is, I would call it matter and metaphysical. So, the metaphysical aspects which the Vedas talk of are not directly perceivable to us. But in fact, whatever metaphysical stuff any religion speaks of in the world, nobody can directly validate it so easily. Make sense?
Yes.
But as far as the matter is concerned, you can validate it because you have tools to validate them today. So just like if you for example say Ayurveda itself, it's completely a text which is there, and all these samhitas, whether Sushruta or Charvak or whatever these are, they talk about so many things actually. And in fact, it is a well-known fact that the Ayurvedic text that you have today is only a small subset of what they actually are. Because especially in the 1,000 years when India was not independent, since the 10th century till 1947, on several occasions the Indian libraries were burned down, like in Nalanda and so many other places, where you lost a lot of material. Because it's a well-known fact that even today there are several textbooks of Ayurveda, etc., which refer to other books which are missing, basically. So you can understand very clearly that you don't have a complete set of knowledge. But still, even what you have today, even in that, it is something, it's a knowledge that works basically, you know what I'm saying? It's something that works. There are people who study it, there are people who actually implement it, and so on. And there's a lot of documentation to the fact that at least even 200-300 years ago, India did have very sound Ayurvedic surgeons in our place. So I was just reading one journal which is printed by the British government. They say that even as late as 1790s, when the British had just come to India, there were people in Pune, Ayurvedic doctors in Pune, who would do a plastic surgery. And they were very famous for that, the journal writes, because there were several people from Maharashtra who were in some way fighting with Tipu Sultan at that time in Karnataka, and they had lost their nose and ears, because that was the punishment that was given by Tipu Sultan, whomever would cut the nose and ear. So these guys would come to Pune to get new nose and ear furnished. So these kind of surgeries are not only spoken in the books, but they have also been implemented in India much before the West could conceive of them. So I'm just trying to tell you, and all this is coming from what? It's coming from verbal testimony. It's coming from your written books. It's not coming from anywhere else, right? That's how it is. Yeah, so basically even if you see, for example, human embryology, there are various, so just like all of you may be knowing that it's only in very recent times that embryology or radiology as a subject in medicine has prospered, whereby you actually know during the 9 months when the baby is in the womb of a mother, at which month, which organ of the baby grows, right? You know that this knowledge we know from science perspective only in the last 20-25 years. Before that we didn't. However, if you see the Vedic texts that talk of embryology, they talk in detail from the first day till the 9th month in the womb of the lady, how the child is growing, at which month what happens, which month the nails come, which month the hair comes, which month the sex is determined. Everything is spoken. So these are some things that are spoken in terms of medicine, which are validated by modern understandings. Yeah, so I'll not go into atomic physics specifically. Now I'll just go into astronomy, because this is again a very important section of knowledge which was always covered in the Vedic. Like for example, there is a very famous book called Surya Siddhanta, It's a textbook of astronomy of ancient India, last compiled in 1000 BC, and it's very, very old. This shows the Earth's diameter to be 7,840 miles, remember, compared to the modern measurements of 7926.7 miles. So it's extremely close to what modern understanding is of the size of the Earth. And again, there is also the challenge in similarly the Earth-to-Moon distance also. For example, the Surya Siddhanta talks about 253,000 miles compared to modern measurements of 252,710 miles. So if you see the point really I'm trying to tell you is that these kind of modern measurements we know only in the last 300-400 years, everything. Before that there was absolutely no clue. Whereas these books are clearly 2,000-3,000 years old, which talk about astronomy. Right? So similarly, even the law of gravity, for example, is spoken, or the time taken to orbit the sun. Okay, in the 5th century itself, there were Indian astronomers like Bhaskaracharya who spoke about the time taken as 365.2587 days. You understand? Now again, if you look at the modern science, they came to know very recently. In fact, the whole calendar that we have today is called as Gregorian calendar. I hope you know that. And it is basically named after Pope Gregory, who somewhere in the, I think 16th or 17th century, if I'm not mistaken, they aligned it properly. Because at least 2000 years back in Rome, in fact there were only 10 months in the calendar. That's why even now if you see September, November, September was the 7th month, Septa. November was the 9th month. Basically later at the time of Julius Caesar, just at the time of Christ, they added July and August in honor of Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar, 2 months. They put it in the middle. So till then they would have only 10 months. But then even then, their year was not 365.25 days. So there was again a problem which Pope Gregory corrected in the 17th century, and that's why we talk about today's calendar as Gregorian calendar, in case you have heard this particular term. Okay, why I am saying this is because the Indian concept of time and date has been pretty accurate since a very long time. I'll give more evidences for this as well. Yeah, so now the question really is why, okay, some more things in astronomy. Copernicus published his theory of revolution of Earth, right, in 1543. 1,000 years before him, Aryabhatta, who is again an Indian astronomer, his writings are there, in the 5th century. He says that the Earth revolves around the sun, just as a person traveling a boat feels that the trees on the bank are moving, people on the Earth feel that the sun is moving. So this is written by Aryabhatta 1,000 years before Copernicus, who is actually credited with the idea that the Earth moves around the sun. And these guys don't say that they invented it. If you see again Aryabhatta, he very clearly says that I know whatever I know because of Surya Siddhanta and other Indian texts. But he doesn't claim to be the inventor of this idea. Okay? Yeah, so in his treatise, Aryabhatta clearly states the Earth is round, rotates on its axis, orbits the sun, suspended in space, and lunar and solar eclipses occur by the interplay of the sun, moon, and the Earth. So this is because all these concepts are there within the Surya Siddhanta. Okay, so it talks about it. Similarly, the law of gravity as well. The law of gravity, again, there is this Indian astronomer called Bhaskaracharya, who notes objects fall on the Earth due to a force of attraction by the Earth. Therefore, the Earth, planets, constellations, moon, and the sun are held in orbit due to this attraction. But the concept of law of gravity, Gurutwakarshan, as it is called in Sanskrit, is known very well to Indian astronomers. Very good. Yeah. So Isaac Newton, of course, spoke about it in 1687. Okay, the question is why am I? Especially astronomy, Indian astronomy was considered way ahead of its times always. The reason why especially in the field of astronomy, the Indian books are so accurate and they really talk about it so well, is because of its connection to astrology. Okay, now please note this. Now, astrology is not it's a metaphysical science, right? Because it's not something that's it's not mainstream science where you apply astrology. So astrology is metaphysical. How the planets are controlling the lives of people. That's it. But the thing is, in order to apply astrology, you had to know astronomy. without knowing astronomy, you cannot do anything about astrology. You cannot do anything about it. And because everything in the Indian system was based on the sky, okay, so for them it was extremely important to understand astronomy. Okay, I'll just give a couple of examples, and then I'll go to some small video as well where I'll show you something from the Mahabharata, a very interesting set of video. But something I'll first show you on the board. So I'll give one example of the connection between astronomy and astrology. So for example, in the Indian system of dating, there is dating, it's like you have dates, calendar. So in the Indian system of dating, the dating is done in terms of era. Okay, so the current era in general is called as the era of Kali. So this Kali Yuga has a starting date. Now this starting date is connected to the astrology. I'll try to come to clear what I want to say. So that is between the midnight of 17th and 18th February 3102 BC, which is way long back. When it was midnight, in the city of Ujjain in India, okay, the understanding is that this age began. Now, of course, one may wonder what is the importance of this date. What is important about this date is, along with the date, the Indian books also talk about the sky on that day. That's where it becomes interesting. So, for example, they explain that the Earth, on this particular day and time, the Earth had all the planets in one line. That means the Sun, the Mars, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, the 7 important planets, all of them in one line. And they had the ascending node of the Moon. Ascending node of the Moon is called as Rahu. Rahu is an invisible planet, by the way, but it is located in the sky in terms of the ascending node of the Moon, where the Moon and the Sun's orbit basically it intersects. It was right on top. This is the description of the sky of this day. Okay, now whether we want to accept the day as, or whether we want to accept Kali Yuga, that's a different thing. But at least today you have software where you could, there's a software called Skyview, where you can go back on any day and see whether the sky was like that. And if you do that, you'll be very surprised to see that the sky was like that on that day. Okay, the sky was like that on that day. That means all planets, according to software,